The wrecking yard is gonna make the kids alright. We're having all the fun until the day is done. The wrecking yard is gonna make the kids alright. We're having all the fun until the day is done. You won't know what hit you till the cows come in the yard. Come on down to the wrecking yard. The wrecking yard is gonna make the kids alright. We're having all the fun until the day is done. The wrecking yard is gonna make the kids alright. We're having all the fun until the day is done. You won't know what hit you till the cows come in the yard. Come on down to the wrecking yard.
Hi, welcome to the Wrecking Yard. This is the second of 3 new episodes, and this one is a doozy. The person I'm talking with today is Shel Talmy, the producer of many, many, many records that are burned into your brain forever. When the sun swallows up the earth, people will still be listening to these records. Now, I have to say that it seemed to me that perhaps Shel got a little bit annoyed with me a few times. Now, I'm not sure, because at the time it did not feel like that or look like that, but I guess the tone of some of the answers just seemed to me maybe that I was maybe annoying him a little bit. And if that's the case, I apologize. But honestly, this was my fault, because I never get nervous when I do these things, never. Sometimes apprehensive, but never nervous. But this time, I was talking to someone whose labors, fueled my childhood. I mean, I remember hearing, Friday on My Mind, or the Who or the Kinks on the radio, and they all just sounded great, and they were exciting, and they would get me all revved up. And this guy had a hand in making history. I guess I might have been a little bit nervous, and when I went into his a very nice, very lovely house, I realized after I sat down and set up that I had forgotten to bring my notes in. So I made a judgment call and thought to myself, well, you know what, I'll bet I can just wing it. And, I did okay, I guess, but I really do wish I had either remembered to bring my notes in or went out to the car and get them. I think I just didn't want to appear like a disorganized schlub. So anyway, I think I did okay. I kind of got the impression that maybe Shel is kind of a no-nonsense guy, and anybody can tell you that I can be somewhat nonsensical. But he was the perfect host. He was very nice. He answered my questions, which I now realize are questions that he's probably been asked 100,000 times, and yet he was still gracious enough to throw an hour of his day to some guy he doesn't know from the Midwest. I'd like to thank friend of the podcast, Alec Palau, for setting this up, and I hope Shel's not mad at him for doing so, and I hope that you can get something out of our conversation. So here's my talk with Shel Talmy. So I understand it was your birthday a day or two ago.
It was.
And they all came down to see you? Alec and Paul?
No, they're up. They're still up north.
Oh.
They're coming down the end of the month.
Okay, yeah. I follow their progress. Alec was one of the first people I talked to. Usually I try to keep them, about an hour or so. And we just kept talking and talking and talking. Yeah.
Alec knows how to talk.
Well, and I do too. And I'm a curious guy who always has a lot of questions.
Right.
And the thing was, he was in a band called the Sneetches, way back when.
Yeah, I know.
And I really liked him. I mean, that's the sort of thing I really like. So my idea was to go and ask him some questions about the Sneetches. And we got so into the production and the writing the liner notes and putting the box sets together. We never.
Well, he's very good at that.
Oh, I
so,
know, and
yeah.
we never got around to talking about the Sneezes at all. So I felt kind of bad because that was the reason I went in there to begin with.
Right.
All I'm going to do is I'll probably ask you some questions that I already know the answer to.
Yeah.
But this way, we can fill in the blanks for folks who don't know. And then basically, I'm just going to ask you to just any stories that pop into your head when I mention something, feel free to let them fly. But the first thing I want to ask is everybody that I've met so far has a singular thing that kind of got them interested in music. Do you remember the day when you went like, hey, I like this, I think I'm going to go in this direction?
The answer is no.
Really? There wasn't like Elvis on Ed Sullivan or anything like that?
Did I have a lightning flash that said no? I never had one of those.
But you've always enjoyed music, I
I've always
assume.
liked music.
Did
Yes.
you grow up in a musical household?
No, I
Really?
did not.
See, now that's funny.
I just like music, and I liked music ever since I can think about it. And back, of course, in the day when they were playing good music on the radio, I listened to the radio a lot.
Well, that's the thing is, I grew up at the exact right time. I was born in 1961. My very first memory is the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. And I must have been, I don't think it was the first one, but I think it was one of them. And I just remember as a child staring at the TV and not being able to really process what was going on because it was so, well, I was only 2, everything was new. But
I would think so.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you even remember.
it hit me that hard. It was like, wow, this just might be the greatest thing ever.
Okay.
So, and then my parents were young. They had me when they were 19. So they had a lot of like, Herman's Hermits and Chad and Jeremy and stuff like that around them. They weren't quite into the Love and the Rolling Stones, but they were in there. And so I grew up just listening to a lot of this stuff. And my grandma lived about an hour and a half away, and we'd go there once a week. And my dad would turn on the local AM station, and a lot of the records that you did right there in the early days sounded so good coming out of that little radio speaker. I have very vivid memories of those first 4 or 5 Kinks singles that were played over here. Of the Who, I remember that just like it was yesterday, because going to Grandma's house meant we were going to rock out for an hour and a half.
Right.
And my parents didn't like to talk to each other, so the car was pretty silent. We had a good chance to listen to stuff. Naturally, that's the stuff I grew up loving.
Okay, cool.
So the next question I'm going to ask is, how did an American producer get stranded overseas?
I didn't get stranded. I went on purpose. I was a recording engineer here in town at Conway Studios, and the owner of which was English, and he kept telling me how great England was. And after a year and a half or so, I said, okay, fine, I give up. I'm going to go check it out for myself.
Right.
I said, I'll be gone for like 5 weeks. I'm going to see London. I want to go to Paris, yada, yada, yada. And I took the precaution of, before I went, saying I really didn't have a whole lot of bread. So I was going to try and work for a couple of weeks just to make some money. And this is a well-known story, but I'll repeat it. My friend Nick Vinay was Capitol Records, A&R, and I told him I was going, and I said I'm going to try and work for a couple of weeks. And he said, here, take my acetates and tell him you did them, because I hadn't really produced anything then.
Right.
And maybe you'll get a gig. I said, oh, cool. So I got over there. And through other people I knew, I got an appointment with Dick Rowe at Decca. He said, and I thought, what the hell, I'll come on as a brash American, because that's probably what he expects anyhow.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be here more than 5 weeks. So I did, and I said, by the way, I'm probably the best producer since sliced bread was invented. And here's what I just did. And I gave him the 2 acetates that Nick gave me, one of which was the Beach Boys, and the other one was Lou Rawls. And Dick said, you start today.
Yeah, that is a great story.
Yeah, by the time they found out it was all bullshit, then I already had a hit.
Right.
So,
Well, yeah, once you've had a hit, they'll bank on you for a while.
right, yeah.
Now, Nick Venet, he handled a lot of the Beach Boys
Yeah, I
stuff.
did the
didn't
original
he?
Beach Boys, Surf
Right.
and Safari.
Yeah. Now, did you
Which
ever
is
have
where I
any
played.
run-ins with any of those folks?
Oh, and I knew them all, sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Were you wary of Mike Love at first?
Wary of?
Yeah, it seems
In
like
what way?
everybody. I don't know. It seems like every time you hear a Mike Love story, it's like, oh, that guy.
I never found him like that. He was fine.
Great. Well, that's good to know. After you said, okay, you start tomorrow. Well, actually, let me ask you a question before that. Did he ever talk to you about turning down the Beatles? Like, did he ever drink one night and go,
no,
oh,
no,
I
I
wish
mean, that's a story everybody already knew.
Right.
I mean, and one of my fonder thoughts is that I had gotten to England a couple of months before I did, and I was there when the Beatles came in, or when what's his face came in, the manager was
Brian Epstein.
Epstein
Yeah.
came in, and I would have chosen the Beatles. Not he left it to Mike Smith, who was his lead A&R guy at that time. And I forget, I can't remember the name of the band he chose
I
instead.
think it was Brian Poole and the
Brian Poole and
Tremolos.
Tremolos,
Yes.
right? Yeah. And I would have chosen the Beatles because I heard the acetate they did of stuff. I said, no,
Right.
no other choice you could make here. The stuff was way better.
Now, this is one of those what-if questions. Do you think that if they had said, okay, great, you're signed to Decca, let's go, do you think they would have been as influential or as popular?
I thought there's no way to answer that question. I
Yeah.
mean, theoretically, if
It's all theoretical.
you're talking about would Dick have gotten? Well, honestly, I don't know how to answer that. Mike Smith was a nice guy. He produced stuff that were hits. He would have been the guy to do the Beatles. Whether he would have done them as well as they eventually got done, who the hell knows?
Right. Well, it always seemed to me that after they had a hit or two, that George Martin kind of gave them a wide berth to be able to do what they want, but he sort of kept their wide berth within parameters that he could.
No, well, certainly what he was a musician, and he knew how to arrange and all that kind of stuff, and I don't think Mike Smith did. And so his experience certainly helped enormously, and the fact that they wrote great songs was a given. So,
Right.
Hell, pick a song and record it. You know?
Okay, so I mean, famously, of course, they did pick up on the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
Did you have any sort of dealings with the?
No, I knew them all very well, but no, I that again came, I think before me. It must have done.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I've become fascinated with is, you've got this very vibrant music scene going on in a town that's full of musicians, and I just wonder, like, say for instance, how common was it for you to say run into Paul McCartney at the grocery store, or I saw John Entwistle at the license branch, or I mean, was it common to just sort of bump into music folks just around town in those days?
Not at the supermarket, no. At least maybe somebody did. I didn't. We all hung out at the same two clubs, the Speakeasy and the Revolution.
Okay.
So those were the two band clubs. So yeah. And from that point of view, yes, we saw each other a lot.
Yeah, because to me, like I say, I was 2 or 3 years old. This is all very large and legendary for me, and for you, it's just like, oh yeah, I saw that dude down the street.
Well, I was, as far as I was concerned, I'm now a record producer, not an engineer anymore. Albeit that I did a lot of my own engineering, and I met all the people, and I liked them all. Got on fine with everybody, pretty much.
Right.
And the fact that I was, I suppose the word is unique, because there weren't any other Americans producing at that time.
Right.
It didn't hurt me, because I got on fine with them.
All right. Well, let's start with the Kinks. What I really want to know right now is there's an original version of "You Really Got Me" that apparently everybody hated.
They didn't. Not everybody hit it. It's not true.
Okay.
Who said that?
Actually, I just heard it in a podcast a couple days ago. Okay, when I say everybody, I don't mean everybody, but apparently the band was very unhappy with it and they didn't want it released.
The band wanted it the way I did it.
Right.
That way, the first time, which was slower and bluesier.
Okay.
And that's the way Ray wanted it. I said, fine, I got no problem with that. It sounds great anyhow. And then he decided, whatever, 3, 4 weeks later, that he really didn't like it at all and wanted to redo it. And I said, okay, no problem.
Right.
We'll redo it.
Were you okay with the first version?
I thought the first version was great. I wish the hell I had a copy of it.
Yeah, I've looked. It
Yeah.
apparently has disappeared in the
No,
mist,
it was
mist
great.
of
It was
time.
slower and bluesier.
Yeah, that's what I'd always heard.
Yeah.
So,
Certainly nothing wrong with it. It would have been a hit.
right. Now, I think those first 3 or 4 singles are about as magical as it gets, for me anyway. They were, they were very important to me as a child. And I'm not even going to go into the whole Jimmy Page thing because I never believed that to begin with.
Oh, I mean about him playing the
Yeah,
solo?
I mean,
I must have answered that question 500 times.
I know, so I'm not even going to ask, but
Right.
I will tell you that my ears tell me I like Jimmy Page fine and I like a lot of what he's done.
Yeah.
But I do not believe that he delivers a solo with the same emotion and soul that Dave does.
I think I agree with that, albeit that if you talk about purely technical, then
Well-
Page is a better guitarist.
Sure. But see, for me anyway, musicianship isn't always the most important thing for me. I've heard lots of crappy musicians
Right.
come up with really good songs that I like. So I try not to get too bogged down in like, can this guy play, really fast or whatever. But that solo it's wild. It kind of comes out of nowhere.
it's great.
It leaps out of the speaker.
It does, and it was meant to. And of
Yeah.
course, I always like making loud records, so I made loud records.
Yeah, and they're the ones that we love. Believe me. Now, were you there the day that I guess he cut the speaker cone with a razor? Is this what I understand?
Yeah, he did it more than once. and he also asked us, where were we?
Loud Records.
What was I saying? Loud Records.
Yeah.
No, there was something some point I was going to make here. I don't know what the hell it is now.
It'll probably pop back up because I have another question. We on this podcast that we were listening to on the way across the country, they mentioned Larry Page.
Yeah.
It's a name I've seen all over the place. I've always been vaguely familiar or vaguely aware of who he is. But then they played us his version of "That'll Be the Day," which I think might have been the largest amount of chutzpah I've ever heard pressed onto a piece of vinyl. We were both laughing our asses off, honestly. And he seems like he was a real character. Can you give me, do you have any
character? He had a large ego. He talked himself into being one of the managers, as far as I can gather. They had 2 other managers, Grenville Collins and Robert Wade, and I have no idea how he got to be added as a manager. In any event, he did, and he at the time he was managing some ballroom in somewhere in the Midlands, and Larry and I had a on again off again relationship. Wasn't great. It was never great.
right?
Besides the fact he tried to unseat me and become the producer, which didn't happen.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So I'm not one of his biggest fans. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah, it's just he just seemed like sort of an obscure character whose name I just keep popping up everywhere. And apparently he's the one that left them stranded in the United States when they did
He
the
did,
one
yeah.
tour.
Well, he was, as you probably also know, he was known as Larry Page, the something rage, and he had green hair and all that kind of crap. So, so he would do whatever he had to do, apparently, what he thought he had to do
Right.
in order to get noticed. So he did. And anyways, yes, carry on. What else do you want to know?
Well, I actually I heard a story once, and it may or may not be true, and maybe you can shed some
Yeah.
light on it. But I'm sure you remember the time that Mick Avery and Dave got in a fight on stage, and Mick threw a cymbal at him
Yeah.
and cut the top of his head open.
Yeah.
So apparently they broke up for a couple of weeks after
Yep,
that.
they did.
Okay. And I guess it must have been Larry Page or one of the other guys said, "Oh, we got a U.S. tour here in a couple of weeks. We have to get them together. We have to figure this out." So apparently they invited each one of them in for a meeting, but didn't tell the other three that the other was coming.
Yeah.
The story goes that they all got into the office. They all started staring at each other like, and the manager says, "Oh, okay, I'm going to do this real fast. I won't even give them a chance to fight." So they walk in, and he says, "Okay, guys, we got a tour coming up. We got to be at Pittsburgh here and Cleveland there, blah, 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 blah." And for 5 minutes, he just goes on and doesn't give anybody a chance to talk.
Probably the smartest thing he could have done.
And then he goes, "Okay, any questions?" And Mick Avery goes, "I'm going to need a new cymbal." That's the story that I heard.
Well, that's a cute story. I like it. I've
Does
never
that
heard the story.
sound right to you? Like something that would have
Sure,
happened?
it could have happened, yeah.
Yeah. Well, now the two Davies brothers are known for being a little volatile.
Well, they did actually fight, and there were a couple of times on sessions where they started fighting, and I would call a 15 or 20-minute break, and the rest of us would go out and have a cup of coffee and leave them to it.
Well, that really answers my question,
Yeah.
because what I was going to ask was, did you ever see any evidence of
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah.
So, wow. So it was right from the beginning, huh?
Mm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the story I've heard on that is that Ray, being the older brother, I guess he was somewhat jealous of Dave when he came around. His family
I don't
politics.
know why the hell he'd be jealous of Dave.
I mean, yeah. Well, Dave seemed like the wild man of the group.
Well, he was certainly more out there and did a lot more drinking and things like that. As somebody just reminded me here, the vignette I just did for this week is on Dandy, and that a couple of people said that Ray really wrote it about Dave, which he may have done. I don't know.
Right. Man, I have all this stuff lined up in my head. What was the last session you did with the Kinks? Was it something
Waterloo
new?
Sunset.
Waterloo Sunset. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not even going to tell you how great a song that is,
That's a
because I
great
know
song,
you
yeah,
know.
Yeah.
Right. Now, after that, did you just move on, or
No,
did they move on?
my contract
or?
ran out, and Pi wasn't going to renew it because Ray had always made it plain that he really wanted to be the producer anyhow. So that was it.
Okay.
We moved on.
Right. Did you produce Autumn Almanac?
Yes.
'Cause that is one of my favorite songs of theirs, and I think it might be the shortest pop song with the most parts I've ever heard. I mean, I think it has like 50 parts in it. It keeps changing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't notice it at first. I always just sort of liked the song, but then a few years ago, I was listening to it, and I was like going, "Are they coming back to that chorus anytime soon?" And then there's like a different part and a different part and a bridge from the bridge, and that song just amazes me. And that album in particular, because that was the first Kinks album I ever had.
Face to Face, or was it?
I always forget if it's something else or something new.
It was on Face to Face, I think. I
think it was a B-side from.
I lose track. It was, yeah, it was a B-side.
Sure. Yeah, but my uncle, I had an older uncle who used to give me records when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me having a Rave Up with the Yardbirds when I was 6 years old, stuff like that. Oh, that's right. And he gave me a copy of something else by the Kinks at one point. And I remember I really liked it a lot, but what sort of started me understanding that there's more to music than just some guys banging around was when I heard the song Two Sisters. You remember that song? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what a weird thing to write a song about. And then I thought about it some more and I was like, oh, that's really sad. And that record in particularly sort of got me started in the idea that music can be more than just whatever happy melody you're hearing on the radio.
Well, tons more, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you may have noticed by now I'm a huge Kinks fan. But then, my second favorite band from around that time was The Who.
Right.
And I know this is kind of probably going to be a sticky conversation.
No, not at all. You want to know about Kit Lambert, is one of the biggest scumbags of all time.
Well,
And Chris Stamp was on pot the whole time I knew him, so I don't think in the entire time that I was doing the Who, I ever even heard him speak.
Really?
So, yeah. They used to, when we were recording, we were at IBC, and the console was facing away from the doors, so the only reason that I knew and everybody else knew, he came and he drifted in, and I could smell pot, and I said, oh, okay, Chris is in the house. And we used to call him the Ghost, because he'd come in, stand at the back of the studio, and then piss off and never say a word to anybody. So.
Wow. Well, I of course watched the movie Lambert and Stamp, and it pretty much, even though I think
in which of course I'm not even mentioned.
Right. But I mean, I noticed that even though they're trying to be sympathetic to him, they still pretty much said the same thing that you just did, just in a more flowery way.
Right.
I met Chris Stamp a couple of times. He was I had dinner at his house once.
Did you? Okay.
My uncle.
I've met him. Obviously I met him, but I don't seriously. I don't think I ever spoke to him.
Well, I was going to say, even not on pot, he wasn't very talkative. He would just, he'd answer a question and he'd say,
well,
how's your pork?
After his quote unquote resurrection, he was a nonstop talker. I guess what I heard when he started doing counseling for various people in New York. So, but I don't know that for a fact. That's what I heard.
Now, so you're producing the first Who album, and I assume that Kit Lambert is like trying to stick his fingers in every pie. Is that?
Kit Lambert was really a piece of shit. There's no other way to put it.
That's what I've heard.
Not full, but he was hitting on young boys, including the band. He also was on heroin, and I always said, who pushed him down the stairs? And actually, Tony Visconti is quoted as saying that a drug dealer pushed him down the stairs because he owed him money. So
that would not surprise me. Not surprise me at all.
Doesn't surprise me either.
Just as an aside, real quick, because you just reminded me of something. Did you ever run into Joe Meek while you were over there?
Once.
Once?
I met him once. I can't say I know him. No.
Okay.
I knew him rather.
All right, yeah, because he seemed like another one of those characters.
He was a strange dude.
That's what I keep hearing.
Right.
That's what I keep hearing. Okay, so back to the Who. What I read was that Pete Townsend contacted you because he liked the way the Kinks singles sounded. Is that correct?
Pretty much, yeah. He liked what I did, and he wrote, I can't explain, to catch my ear.
Right.
Because it was kinky-ish. I said, it's a great song. I like it a lot. Yeah, we can do that.
Now, did you find
The Who, by the way, I've told this story many times. I went to see them originally at a church hall, and I literally after 8 bars, I said, yes, I'll sign you. They were. I thought the best rock and roll band I'd heard since I'd been in England.
Right. Well, what I've heard from the other people that I've asked, who I've met from that era, when I ask them who was the best live band of the British invasion, it's always the Who. They always say, yeah,
they were.
Who.
Yeah, they were.
Occasionally, somebody will say, well, the Move were pretty good, but for the most part,
not in the same category.
Yeah, it's always the Who when they talk about the best live performances. And I've seen, when The Kids Are All Right came out, I was so excited because back then there was no way for me to see any of that stuff. So it was like a candy store for an hour and a half for me. Mm-hmm. But here, 20 years later, I've seen so much footage that was not in that movie. There's some live footage from Germany that is absolutely outstanding.
Really? Okay.
It's from about 1965, 66 or so. They were still wearing suits, not quite into the fringe and the pantsuits yet.
Right.
And it's raucous. I mean, the crowd's going nuts. They're going nuts, and it's a thing of beauty.
They could get the crowd at it, yes.
Oh, I'm sure. And you know what? I never got a chance to see them. My uncle saw them at a little resort on a lake in Indiana, and he would tell me these stories. He said, well, Keith Moon, he filled up his bass drum with milk, so that when he would hit it, it would like spray up into the air. And then he said,
news to me.
Yeah, I guess it was a live thing he did there.
Okay.
Well, let me tell you this about Indiana. You have to make your own fun. So Yeah.
I was brought up in Chicago. I know Indiana.
Yeah. So, but anyway, my uncle told me, he says, then at the end of the show, he says there was this long line of fluorescent lights along the side of the stage, and he said that Pete Townsend took his guitar, shoved the headstock up into the fluorescent light, and then just ran the stage across, spraying glass all over the front of the stage. And he bought, and he bought me or he didn't buy me, but he bought a tour program, and he gave it to me later, and it was like my prized possession until my stepbrother tore it up and used it to paste on his wall. Yeah.
Did you kill him?
So many times I came close. So many times. It's funny, too, because like years and years and years later, he tried to recontact with me. And I said, dude, don't take this wrong. I said, but I wasn't really happy with you or anything that happened while you were living in our house, so I don't really want to relive it. And then I blocked him. I told him, no offense, I don't hate you. I'm just not interested in anything.
I don't want to speak to you again.
Yes, I don't want anything to do with anything. All right, so I know there was some sort of a legal kerfuffle over that first Who album, because it was the last one to be released on CD for a while because it was tied up in court.
No legal kerfuffle. What there was that Lambert decided I was having too much influence on his boys, quote unquote, and I got a letter in the mail, legal, saying your contract is null and void. And I did not take that very lightly and sued.
Right.
And won, of course, because I had never done anything but hits with The Who.
Right.
And got royalties for several years afterwards and all that kind of stuff. And, but unfortunately, I never got a chance to record them again.
Yeah, I know, and that's so sad too, because it's conventional knowledge is those early records that you did sound so much better than what came after.
I don't think anybody will disagree with that.
No, I haven't met one
yet.
yet.
Probably Lambert.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't think I matters.
Who they
at this
fired,
point.
by the way.
Right. Oh, I know. They did not have, or they have. I maybe I forgot to mention this. My brother was Roger Daltrey's personal assistant for a few years, and he said none of them had anything good to say about Kid Lambert.
No, there's nothing good to say about him.
Right. And they said that they weren't really bad talking Chris Stamp per se, but he said he could tell that they were trying to keep a certain amount of distance, and this was later on. This was this was in the 90s.
Really?
So,
okay.
Yeah. We'll move on a little bit here because I don't want to just talk only about two bands. After the Who and after you stopped doing the Kinks, you did stuff like is the Creation.
Did Creation, yeah.
Now and then Pentangle.
Pentangle.
Which I really love that stuff.
Yeah, me too.
Is stuff like that harder to record than say like a 4-piece?
No, Pentangle was one of the easiest bands I ever recorded.
Really?
They were probably the most competent band from top to bottom of any band I've ever recorded.
Yeah, because I absolutely love those records.
Yeah, so do I. And they still sound great. I'm so pleased with them.
No, yeah, my question was just, and it's probably an obvious one too. Is it more difficult to record, say, like 7 or 8 piece band than like a 3 or 4 piece band? I guess that's what I was asking before.
No, the answer is no. It depends on who's playing in the band.
Right.
If you're talking about equal competence, then no, of course not. I've recorded orchestras several times, and all of whom were great musicians, no problem whatsoever.
Right.
You just got to know how to mic them and which channel to put them on, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's not a problem. But again, I did start out as a recording engineer, so including the fact that Conway was one of the favorite studios of the Wrecking Crew, so I really had an excellent grounding of great musicians from the get-go. I
was going to back up again and just ask a quick question. I heard once that specifically on a lot of the Capitol Frank Sinatra records, that they would record the entire orchestra with just a single stereo mic hanging over the top of them. Is that correct?
They usually had 2 or 3, and that was it. You know,
Okay.
not one.
But and they weren't miking the drums separately at that
No,
time, right?
no. I'm the one that actually started. When I started, everybody was miking drums with about 3 mics, maybe 4. I thought I really want lots more control, so I figured out how to do it with 12 mics. And I, of course, was told you can't do it because it'll phase. I said, well, I guess you'll just have to listen. And everybody started using 12 mics after they heard. So,
Right.
Yeah, but as far as I know, I am the one that started using that many mics on drums. Same thing with orchestras. Once technology improved and we got larger 4-channel tape machines, 8-track, 16, 24-track, where you could separate all these things out, then everybody started using more mics because, especially with orchestras, you'd mic them in sections, and maybe even 2 or 3 mics to a section, because it gave you lots more control, and that was the whole point.
I have to ask this because everyone will get mad if I don't.
Right.
Keith Moon, was he easy to work with in the studio?
One of my favorite people.
I've heard he was a really sweet guy.
He was a great guy.
Right.
And also, without question in my mind, the best rock drummer of all time. There's been I used Clem Cattini, I used Bobby Graham, 2 great drummers. But nobody could play just like he could. If you ever listen to the Ox,
Sure. I have before, believe me.
And it's a tour de force.
Well, and the thing I find interesting, and I only just noticed this recently, is I don't think he used a hi-hat until the late 70s. When I see all this Who live footage, I never see a hi-hat.
I don't even remember.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was one because I would have insisted on having one.
Well, I guess I don't know this for sure, but I heard that live he said he couldn't hear it, so he didn't want it, and so everything he would do with the hi-hat he would just do with a regular cymbal.
Yeah, he did mainly cymbals, but he did have a hi-hat, and I probably went, because he was so good with the cymbals, that I probably kept the hi-hat down, I would think. I think I'm pretty sure that's the way I did it.
So at no point did you have to say, like, hey, could you not hit him so hard? We're going in the red here.
My story I've told about 5 million times is because you know how wild he could be when he was playing. I had mic'd him up with my 12 mics, and I said, Keith, do me a favor. These mics are incredibly expensive. I don't care how close you get, don't fucking hit him. He said, no problem. And he came within a millimeter, but he never hit a mic.
Well, the thing I always liked about him, I played drums for a while, and I was nowhere near as good. But what I always liked about him was that no matter how wild the fill was, and how much your mind was thinking, oh no, he's not coming back from that, somehow or another, he would always end up coming
brilliant.
Right back
He was
where he needed to. But I also think that I'm not sure that he could have played with very many other bands. I think that he somehow managed to end up with the perfect people that he should have ended up with.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
He did.
So tell me a little bit about the Creation, because a lot of people I know really like them.
Great band. And one of my biggest regrets is that I could not keep them together when they finally broke up. I just made a huge deal for them with Ahmet Ertegun, and who would have made them superstars. And I couldn't keep them together. I tried everything, but it didn't work.
Now, was it band politics or?
It was they wound up hating each other. Not all of them hated, but enough of them hated each other. So they used to leave and come back, and I always described the Creation as like a revolving door of musicians. I never knew who the hell was going to turn up. I had some really good musicians replace the ones that left. But they're great. It was mainly Eddie Phillips and Kenny Pickett who were the main writers at the beginning. Wrote great songs, and wrote Making Time, and wrote Painter Man, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And Eddie Phillips was, and still is, because he's still alive, one of the best unknown to most people guitarist of all time.
Right.
He was great. He's
Oh,
the
yeah.
one that started the violin bow on the guitar that Jimmy Page took.
Well, Jimmy was known for borrowing a thing
He
or
did
two
borrow,
here or there.
yeah, he did borrow.
You know,
He-
I don't hold it against him because
No,
I mean
no,
he
he
did his
eventually
thing.
owned up,
Yeah.
even though he claimed it at the beginning, but he finally owns it, that he actually got it from Eddie.
Right.
Eddie was asked to join The Who, and he turned it down.
I also read somewhere, it was an interview with Ray Davis, and he sounded like he really did not like Jimmy Page at all. I mean, the way he was talking, he was just like, he said, and I was going to ask you if
Yeah.
this is true, he said that when Dave was doing a solo on a song at one point,
Mhm.
he looked over at the booth and he saw Jimmy Page laughing. And he just assumed that he was laughing at this guitar solo. And he said he'd hated him ever since. I mean, he used those words. He was like, "I hate that guy." Blah 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 blah.
Well, I know he didn't like him. It kind of really started when I used Page instead of Ray. Ray didn't want to play rhythm guitar. He wanted to concentrate on his singing.
Right, and that makes sense.
And I booked Jimmy
Mm-hmm.
because he was great, and he played rhythm guitar.
Right.
And not lead. It was always Dave that played lead. So I know he didn't like him. But then again, hey, you can't like everybody. You know, that's cool. You know,
Yeah.
It didn't impact on the records we got
Right.
done.
Okay, now back to the Who again. Did you find when you and Pete Townsend were working together, did you have a pretty good working relationship? Do you think
I
it would have
very-
lasted
I had-
longer?
I had a very good working relationship with Pete. Yes. In fact, I liked everybody. Roger and I never got along great, but then Roger didn't get along great with anybody. He got kicked out of the band twice.
Right.
And
Well, that was the other story I heard.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's true.
Yeah, he punched
He
Keith
was,
in the
he
face
was,
or something.
he used to start fights and everything else. He's a strange dude, I think. I don't know.
Well, I heard he was a boxer or an amateur boxer
I think
before.
He probably was. I think he was.
Yeah, and he seems to sort of have that demeanor.
No, he had an attitude, and not always a good one. But of course, he's a great singer.
Yeah, I
That's-
agree.
That's why he getting rehired.
And what about John Entwistle? What was
John talk about not speaking. I think in the entire time I did The Who, I heard 6 words out of him. It wasn't until several years later when I saw him in L.A. at a party.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first and only conversation I ever had with him.
Yeah. Well, you know, some people are naturally quiet.
Yeah, he was naturally quiet.
Yeah, you know. Wow. So when were you still in London when Jimi Hendrix showed up? Do you remember
Yeah, I
the
think
hubbub
I was,
around
yeah.
that?
Yeah, it was, yes. So what?
Well, I know, but you hear all these exaggerated stories about how like every guitar player in town was at this one show, and then Eric
Yeah,
Clapton
well,
started
that's-
crying and all that stuff.
I don't believe any of that.
Okay. I'm just trying to separate the myth from.
No, I don't believe any of that.
Okay.
And I saw Jimmy when he first got there, and again came to either the Speakeasy or the Revolution, because there was, I said, they were the 2 band clubs,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think he was particularly treated any different than anybody else there, because everybody in the joint was a celebrity of sorts,
Right.
top musicians. So
Well,
yeah.
the story goes that Pete Townsend told Eric Clapton, "You got to go see this guy. You're not going to believe it." And then Eric Clapton went and he said he started crying.
I don't believe.
Well, the other story I heard
Yeah.
was that when Jimmy got into town, he went to see Cream or Eric Clapton with some other amalgamation of blues guys or whatever, and they invited him up to play. And I've also heard that he cried then too. So it's probably neither story's true.
I've never heard him. I've never heard anybody say he cried.
Well, I'm not sure they meant.
I
I'm
don't
not sure
know.
they meant literally, but you know how stories go. They get inflated as
Okay,
time
I've
goes
never
by.
heard
And
that. Never heard that story.
wow. So you remember when he got into town? I mean,
Yeah.
were there a lot of people going, "Hey, psst, 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 you gotta see this guy," whatever?
Yeah, no, he came with a reputation. He was certainly excellent.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been working with excellent guitarists and musicians for a long time, so
Right.
that was nice.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Now, back to the creation a little bit. I mean, other than the creation, was there ever a band where you just wished, or I'm sorry, that you think could have done something but just didn't? Like, I guess your biggest disappointment.
That was my biggest disappointment. They were great. They should have been superstars, and they just did not stay together long enough for it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because those records are great.
No, thank you. I'm so pleased with them. They still sound great. They're going to be played forever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So okay, so after you're not producing the Kinks anymore, and the Who is kind of gone and everything. At what point did you say, hey shit, I've had enough of this. I need to go back home?
I did a whole bunch of other bands. I did Manfred Mann. I did Chad and Jeremy. I did all kinds of people.
Right.
I did Small Faces. I mean, it kept me off the streets.
Sure. Okay, Small Faces then. Let me ask a question or two about Steve Marriott.
Steve Marriott was wild.
That's what I heard.
Yes, he was a nice guy. He was also a druggie, and therefore it made it very difficult to record him, including the guys in the band who felt exactly the same way.
Well, so, I mean, but that voice.
Oh, it was great.
I mean, really.
No, he was great. Excellent musician, great singer. I did an album with Vicki Brown, who you may or may not know, who was the ultimate backing singer of all time. She was married to Joe Brown, and Steve came and played some stuff on the session, and he was great. And Vicki Brown was brilliant, by the way. Another one of my regrets that she should have been a major superstar.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm getting the impression that a lot of these folks either weren't nice guys or thought that they couldn't be and still be successful.
I unfortunately ran into every crook and asshole in the music business in England, whether I liked it or not. But apparently I did. So, I will absolutely tell you, way outnumbered by the good people.
That's nice. Yeah, I just think that somehow show business in general attracts people with very...
Well, America had the same problem. There's tons of people that were stealing and had a reputation of it, like what's his name, Levy.
Morris Levy.
Morris Levy.
Oh yeah.
And others. There's a bunch of others like
Sid
him.
Nathan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of others like him. So I mean, it wasn't just England; it was everywhere.
Yeah, I read that.
They did it because they could.
Yeah, I read Tommy James and the Shondells. I read his biography.
Yeah.
And he said that they were literally scared of their record label. They said, who
was he with? Were you?
Yeah, Morris Levy. Roulette.
Was it Roulette? Well, a lot of people were scared of being with Roulette.
Yeah, and he said they'd tell him, hey, it's time to make a record, and he said he couldn't say no. He'd say, okay, I'll go do one. And he said he got to the point where they were asking him to record so much that sometimes he would take a song and then just turn it backwards and then write a song over the same melody backwards. But he made it sound like every day going to the office.
Well, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I've heard lots of stories about what Levy did and who people he threatened and all that kind of crap.
Right.
I met him maybe twice, and briefly, and I never had anything to do with him. So I've got nothing to tell you about him except that his reputation, which I knew about.
Oh yeah. Now, if someone were to come up to you and say, okay, what is the one record that you want to be remembered by and judged by? Which would it be?
I couldn't tell you. There's several for which I am extremely proud of, including things like Friday in My Mind, which you haven't mentioned yet.
Oh, I was getting there.
Yeah,
I was getting there.
And certainly Waterloo the Sunset, and You Really Got Me, and My Generation, obviously, and a whole slew of others.
Okay, so the Easy Beats, yes, I was getting to that. Now, they were from Australia, but did they relocate to London, or did they just go there to record?
They relocated to London after they had some success in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
They were managed by, what is it, his bloody name? I always try to forget it.
Yeah, this one I'm not remembering.
Whatever. And anyways, who came? The manager was the son of a very successful publisher. So he had lots of bread, and he allegedly produced some stuff that they had hits with in Australia, but they weren't too picky in Australia at that time. Anyways, he relocated to L.A.
Mm-hmm.
and he actually had a guy managing the band besides him who got him a deal with United Artists, and apparently he did a couple of records and they were so bad that UA fired him. And the next I heard somebody doesn't matter who, came and asked me if I'd be interested in listening to the Easy Beats. I said sure, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked them. I liked pretty much what they had done. I didn't like many of the songs they did. So I said, I'll tell you what, guys, I'd like you to go and write songs and come up once a week and play me what you've done, and let's see if we can pick one.
Mm-hmm.
This went on for about 5 or 6 weeks until they finally came up and they played Friday Night Mine. And after about 6 bars, I said, yes, that's it. We're going in next week.
Yeah, that was a huge record in Indiana. A huge record. I remember hearing that every 10 minutes.
It was even a bigger record in Australia.
I'm sure.
It was voted as the greatest rock and roll record of all time.
Now, I really like Good Times as a single, too, though. Did you do that one as well?
Which one?
Good Times? I'm going to have a good time tonight.
I think I did, but I'm not
It was
positive.
right around the same period.
Yeah, I must have done that. Yeah. I don't know. I've done so many things. I have a historian now who knows way more about what I did than I know what I did.
Right.
Who's Alec, by the way.
Oh, yeah. He was, I could have talked to him all day long.
Yeah.
Because everything, he'd say something, it would remind me of something else. And I go, hey, what about, and then next thing, I'm looking at my watch, and it's
he's
like 3
managing
hours.
my archives. He knows way more about what I've done than I know what I've done.
Well, the day I got there, he had just apparently gotten a bunch of tapes from you. And he said that he found, I guess, some unreleased David Bowie stuff. And,
Yes,
he was
that's
very
true.
excited about
And I'm excited about it. And at some point, those are going to be released. And we've been working on how to work the deal the best possible way.
Right. Now, I met David Bowie a couple of times, and both times he was really nice to me, nicer than he even needed to be.
He was a very nice guy.
Right. So
I got on with him great.
that's what I was wondering. But when he walked into the studio, was this, or when you first met him, I guess, was he already all decked out in the garish clothes?
He was 17.
Right.
He was brought to me by a friend of mine. And I liked him immediately. He was smart. He was brash. Reminded me of me.
Right.
And I liked what he had been writing, and so we went in and did stuff. I mean, the problem with that was we were 5 or 6 years ahead of the market, which surprised the hell out of me. But because I thought for sure he was going to make it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But what he eventually hit with was pretty much the same thing we've been doing 5 years earlier.
Yeah. I know he had a little bit of a road to hoe to get to where he was going. The first time I met him, he was doing The Elephant Man. He was doing the play The Elephant Man.
I saw him in that.
Yeah, he was great.
Did a damn good job, yeah.
Yeah, so we drove from Indiana up to Chicago, and we saw the show, and we're going around the back to get in our car, and we look over, and he's coming out the back door, just like anyone else, and we thought, oh, okay, we should try to get him to sign our playbills. So we walked up to him, and I said, this is to my utter embarrassment, I said, hey, you were really good in that. I was surprised. I was trying to be complimentary, but it just came.
It must have gone down well.
Came up. No, he was very nice. He kind of chuckled and but when I met him much later, I met him in 2004, and he had recognized me because I did a movie about the legendary Stardust Cowboy, and that I appear in a short sequence in there. And we went backstage because he really wanted to meet the legendary Stardust Cowboy. As you know, he got a portion of his Ziggy Stardust persona from that person.
Right.
And I walked up to him and he goes, "You're the bloke that did that movie, aren't you?" And again, I was
Good on him.
like silent. I was like,
Hmm.
David Bowie knows who I am. But he was just a real sweetheart both times
No, he's
that
good.
we
He's
met
a good
him.
guy.
All right, well, we are right at an hour, and I don't want to eat up your day or
Right.
bore you.
Well, actually, I've got another appointment coming up. Oh Christ, they're going to be here in about 10 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll tell you. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
How just wrap it up. Tell me how you're doing these days.
I'm doing
And,
fine. I mean, but basically, I've been concentrating on doing the Facebook vignettes because a lot of the studios have been closed, and in any event, there's no real labels to work with anymore because they're all staffed by bean counters, and
Right.
it's got to be the internet or nothing. And there's people just lying out, not wanting to do anything. So, looks like one of the studios I use will reopen in the next week or two, and so I'm really happy to get back in.
Well, I read and I post every one of those that you share.
Do you?
So, every one of them.
Okay.
You can see that's my thing. I grew up as a history lover. I was kind of a odd kid and I got grounded a lot. So I'd be in my room and I had nothing to do. And my grandma, she started buying me these encyclopedia sets of American history and of world history and this and that and blah blah.
Right.
So I had nothing to do but read those. And so I grew up with a very healthy curiosity about music or about history, and then when music sort of melded into it, I was off to the races. So, so this conversation is one I've been looking forward to for a very long
good.
time, and I'm so happy that you agreed to carve out a little time for me.
Yes. Well, it's fine. It was. We had a conversation. It was nice.
All right. Yeah. I guess I'm always afraid I'm going to bore people or piss them off or something.
No.
So.
I probably would have told you if you had.
All right, good. All right, well, we can close her down right there then. It's almost exactly an hour.
Okay.
That was wonderful. Oh, my gosh. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.
The wrecking yard is gonna make the